Hello, welcome to the channel. This will be my very first YouTube video, so bear with me. The topic today will be the Borg 1305, 1339 Quadratrac transfer cases. These were available in full-size Jeeps, Cherokees, Wagoners, J-Trucks from 73 to 79, and in CJ7s from 1976 to 1979. My interest is that I have a Jeep 1977 Jeep CJ7 that came from the factory with one of these transfer cases, and so they're a little outdated technology and a little bit difficult to keep running because parts are a little hard to find. They're not all that popular, so we have to get a little creative to keep some of these old things running. I'm going to do a few videos to fully tear down and rebuild, at least to the best of my ability, these transfer cases. This video will concentrate primarily on the low range unit and not the main case. We'll do another video on tearing that down and rebuilding it, but we wanted to show you the differences between the 1305 and 1339. So the 1305 is just the main case without the low range unit, and the 1339 includes the low range unit, which is a simple bolt-on unit, which we'll show you here soon. Right now the case is in high range, so just to demonstrate, this is about a 256:1 low range. So we'll see that in high range, one turn of the input shaft from the transmission produces one turn of the output shafts for the drive shafts. If we then shift to low range, we'll see that one turn of the transmission input shaft produces about less than half of a turn of the output shafts for the drive shafts, so thereby multiplying the torque to about 2.56:1. So more power, more engine braking. So that's that. Now, my primary interest in making the video is so that when I do this again several years from now, that I can look back and see what I did. Last time I did this was, I don't know, 2003, and I've forgotten everything I did back in 2003. So now we'll have a nice record, and I thought, well, maybe someone else in YouTube land would benefit from this. So first, let's separate the low range unit from the main unit, and we'll go from there. So there's two 5/16 bolts here. So we need a 1/2 inch socket. And I'll have to say, this is a instructional video. It's not really for entertainment, so it'll get a little boring watching me take bolts out. You're not going to find any epic drone footage off-road or dramatic music, just wrenching. So we'll see how it goes. The other 3 bolts are 3/8, so I need a 9/16 to pull those out. Alright, so if you want to take this apart, first, of course, you would want to drain fluid in it. This one's already been drained, but to drain the main case, there's a drain plug here. We won't take that today since we're not talking about the main case. And then to drain the fluid out of the low range unit, you simply loosen those bolts, maybe leave one or two in, and pull the unit back to separate it from the case. Let the oil drain out, and then you can pull it all the way off. So this is rather easy until you get on camera, and then you struggle. Alright, so simple as that to remove. Let me set up again. I'll get the main case out of the way. We'll talk about this planetary and how all this works a bit later. Okay, let me get reset. Alright, before we get the case out of the way, let me show you the configuration that the 1305 version comes in. This planetary gear cage is held on by a snap ring. So the 1305 without the low range would not have the planetary gear set, but instead has a drive hub. So the transmission output shaft comes all the way to here and drives this, which then drives the internals of the case. And then there's a snap ring here that's just like the one I took off. That will snap into place there. Like that. And then it will have, instead of the full case for the low range, just a simple cover. It goes like this. So that is the 1305 configuration from the factory. Alright, now let me move this case out of the way. Okay, here we have the low range unit on the bench, ready to disassemble. The reasons you might want to disassemble this is there are 5 bearings. We will replace all 5 bearings on the rebuild. And in the case that's currently installed on the Jeep, it is leaking pretty badly from the shift lever shaft. Was an O-ring behind here, which I think maybe you can get to from the outside, but I'm going to fully disassemble the whole case. This is a particular unit. You see it's a bit rusty. This was sitting outdoors for an unknown amount of time, but I picked it up for next to nothing. So the reason I take this one apart is really just to see if there's any parts to salvage, but for the purposes of the video, it should work just fine. And then I wanted to mention that just for, there are basically 2 main sources of information for these old Borg transfer cases. Online, there's Jubilee Jeep's website it's put together by a fellow named Flint. He seems probably to have forgotten more about these cases than probably I'll ever know. So Flint, if you find this video, please jump in the comments and correct all my mistakes. And then on YouTube, there's one channel called Days of Pain and Victory. There's 3 videos that give a good bit of information on the operation and maintenance of these transfer cases. But I wanted to go into a bit more detail. Either way, I'll link the website and the YouTube channel below, so definitely go check those out if you need to learn about these transfer cases. And since that's all there, I will not go into a deep history of these. So instead, let's start taking it apart. So step 1 is to pull off, this is a power takeoff cover. To my knowledge, there were never any attachments that were designed to run from this power takeoff cover, but then again, I could be wrong. If so, drop it in the comments. while I'm taking these bolts out, I'll just say that this transfer case seems to have a group of haters and people who really love it. Haters generally think it's weak and useless and a waste of time. And some people swear it's the best transfer case ever built. For me, I like it. I'd like to keep it running. I'd say the truth between these love and hate things is somewhere in the middle, as usual. That's where truth lies, right? So it's pretty good. It's not perfect. Anyway, like I say, I want to keep mine running, so we'll try to do that. Alright, so behind the power takeoff cover you find the main annular bearing, which we'll get to and replace, and that's held with a snap ring in the front and the back. And then the main shaft is also captured on this side of the bearing by a snap ring, which we will attempt to now remove. Helps if you do it the right way first time. So, yep, there's a snap ring, and then there's a spacer behind that. So once the snap ring is off, the case should lift off the rest of the gear train. So just like that. There's a few more parts in there we'll get to. Maybe this isn't as bad a shape as I assumed from the rust on the front side. So one problem with these cases is these coarse 10-spline shafts tend to wear pretty quickly, and that's true of the transmission output shaft that goes here and then the main shaft in the reduction unit. So one of my interests here is to investigate this shaft and see how loose the splines are, so that may be worth salvaging. So to disassemble the gear train, you can pull all these gears off the main shaft, the ring gear, and then you're left with some thrust bearings. So this is the main shaft and the sun gear in the whole assembly, which I think may be held with a snap ring. I'll find out. So just to go through the parts, this is the direct drive sleeve. Behind that you find a thrust needle bearing. Up next is the shift collar hub, and then another thrust needle bearing here, and this is the reduction collar hub. We'll go through this and see if we can show how all this works together. This is the reduction collar plate hub. It's held in by this snap ring, which we can now remove. Okay, well, I struggled with that, but that comes out. Then that separates the reduction collar plate hub from the reduction collar plate. And that's also held into this ring gear by a snap ring. out like this. Reduction plate hub and the ring gear. So I'm not sure how this main shaft is held in into the sun gear, but the service manual says do not separate, so we will not attempt to separate those two. So, okay, then in that case, these are all the disassembly steps for the gear train. So the next step for all these is to clean them all up, get them ready for reassembly. We'll find some new bearings for all four of the thrust bearings. So these are the serviceable parts essentially. For the gear train. So we'll put that aside and then we'll look at the rest of the case. Okay, next we'll go after the shift color. This is what engages the part of the mechanism that engages the low and the high range. So to get this out, you shift the shift lever to neutral to get the fork here to disengage from the groove that's in the side of this. Pull it slightly forward, then move the shift position to high range and mesh the gear and the teeth to the plate that's in the case, and then shift forward again to low range and the shift collar comes out. And then the next thing we'll go after is this annular shaft bearing. We'll do that from the other side. So that's held by two snap rings. Need a different tool. There we go. And that comes right out. The bearing is not a press fit, but it can be sort of stuck in there, especially in this case it's been sitting out in the weather. That seems fairly snug in there. Alright, I'll get a driver and we'll push that out. Okay, what I have here is just a aluminum seal driver. You should tap this right out without too much force. Okay, there we go. A pretty large annular bearing, deep groove ball bearing. This one's in, I'd say, really bad shape. It's pretty bound up, so we'll need to replace that. So that can go here where there are other bearings. We'll have to find replacements for those. This other snap ring you could leave in or take out. I'm going to take it out so it can clean everything nicely. And these snap rings are select fit for the bearing, so they need to be certain thicknesses. If you don't have a caliper to measure them, mark this one and this one and put them back in the same spot. you have a caliper, you can just measure later and make sure you get the right one in the right spot. And we'll go through the thicknesses on those when we do the rebuild. So what I'm doing here is just taking that snap ring, prying it downward. And there it comes up. Okay, so now we're left with the shift mechanism and this holding ring in the case. So there's a roll pan that the shift fork moves back and forth on there. And it needs to come out. So shift the fork all the way down, and then the idea is to grab onto it with some pliers and pull it out, but in my experience these are very tight in the case and that may not work. We'll try. Right, so as I usually find, these are really stuck in the case. No amount of pulling from above seems to quite do it. So instead of struggling with it that way, we'll move on to the next step and we'll get it out later. So the next step is I want you to remove this large expansion plug, and I'll need a drift. First I'm going to clean a little bit of the crud around the edge. So these are installed by punching them into the center to make them expand into the bore, but that's also how you remove them. So you take a drift or some sort of punch and give it a couple hard hits. This has been in here a while, so it may not want to come out. This one definitely does not want to come out. I've had this problem before. Basically it's been in there for roughly 40 plus years. It's corroded in maybe. So we'll try a different approach. So we'll try to press it out with a C-clamp and something like a small socket. You can access the back of that plate through a large hole here. Something to reach back there and touch it, like this socket. That seems to have loosened it up a bit, moved it out to the edge. Let's see if we can get it out now. This is more stuck than any I've seen before, but that's the way it goes. Okay, so I just took the same socket, so we get a little bit of a hammer swing in here, and ejected this fella out. And if you had not put a dimple in it here, it's possible you could reuse it. Maybe you could bend it back out and reuse it. I personally don't like using things that are deformed to fit, so we'll find a new one of these and replace that as well. Alright, now with that out of the way, you can see the shifter mechanism. Alright, so there's a shaft with a tab on it. The interfaces with the fork here, the back of the fork, all attached to the shaft, and there's a detent ball here. You can see one of the detent grooves that would be for, right now it's in high range, and then when you shift it forward, it goes to that groove of the ball detent, and now it's in the low range position. So the next thing that comes out, there's a bore here that this shaft rides in, and they're little taper plugs. They're like similar to freeze plugs, but backwards. They're just tapered the opposite direction, but they're essentially the same thing. I'm not 100% sure the correct way to take these out. I think you punch them in the center, which will make them deform and pop out. What I've also done in the past is free up the shaft and use the shaft to pop them out this way, but I'm going to try to take them out from this side first. So I'll try this with a small punch. I actually drove it into the bore. I think that's okay. Once they're loose, they should come out a little easier. That one seems loose. Crud off. So the next task is to pull this shifter lever off the shifter shaft. Turns out it's frozen on there, so I'll try something different. Okay, so now I have a breaker bar in 9/16. Alright, broke that free. That's a 9/16 fine thread, lock washer underneath. And then this is sort of pressed onto here. There's a profile to the shaft that matches a hole there. I'll show you when I take it off. So there's a slotted hole in the shifter, and the threaded part has flats on it. Maybe we can see it better this way. And there's two flats cut on either side, match up to the slot. Now the O-ring I mentioned earlier that leaks is here, so it looks like the shaft does have to come out to get to it. I wasn't sure about that. So the next thing we do is take a small punch to separate the fork where it rides on the shaft here. Like that. So for this I'll use a 3/16 punch. Drive this pin. Not sure where the pin is. There it is. Alright, so a little spring roll pin, about 3/16. We'll reuse that. So now you can see the fork is no longer attached to the shaft. So now we need to slide the rail out, but I didn't get these plugs out of the end yet. Yeah, I think we can continue driving this into the bore and push it out the other side. So I just pushed the little freeze plug, taper plug out the other side. The shift shaft has protruded here now, and it looks like we drove the other one all the way through the bore and out this way. So we'll replace those. For those out of the way, the shaft itself comes out. And what you just heard was the detent ball that rides in these two grooves coming out. And it should be here. So there's a detent ball, there's a spring behind that, we'll get that. At this point the shift fork would come out if we had managed to pull this pin already, but there is enough play to slide it over the pin and out. Now we can go ahead and get the shifter lever out by driving this cross pin out. That pin is rather stuck. Maybe it will go this way. Yeah, I got it. So this is not a spring pin, this is just a little steel rod. I'll clean that up where we hammered the ends. And with that pin out, the shift mechanism, shifter shaft should tap out. So there is the shifter shaft. So this is what engages the fork and moves the fork back and forth on the rail. And it's sealed with an O-ring here. And this is the O-ring that's leaking on the case I have installed currently. So I needed to get this far into it to get that O-ring. So I'll quickly hook that out of there. So I don't know what size O-ring this is, but we'll find out and find a replacement. So we'll put that in the serviceable parts pile. So now all that's left is that stubborn pin that didn't want to come out the easy way. So now with everything else out of the way, you can lock onto it from the side with some vice grips. I'm going to flip it over and then do a little hammering on that vice grips. You want to lock onto it pretty tight because it's a roll spring pin, so you can compress it a little bit, which should help it release. Okay, there we go. Those are somehow super tight in that aluminum case. But anyway, it's out. And it's just a roll spring pin. Then once that is out, we can take out the stamp ring that holds this holding plate in. Snap ring. Then this holding plate will come out, and you can see it has little feet on the bottom that mesh to holes in the case. And so this is what locks the ring gear on the planetary, essentially, or gives it something to lock against the case itself, essentially, to go into low range. We'll see if we can demonstrate that a little better later. And so then there's still a spring here in this channel. I can feel it here that holds the detect ball. You can see maybe there. So we need to take that out. And to do that, there's another taper plug here, which we can drive. Just drive it straight through into the bore. Drives that out, and it's just a smaller version of the other taper plugs, freeze plugs, whatever you like to call them. It's a 3/8. The other one's a 3/4. Now with that hole open, the spring should fall out. However, it's not lined up. There we go. So I use a punch to help keep it aligned. And there it is. low range, the tent ball spring. Okay, so that's mostly disassembled. The only thing left that I will take out for cleaning purposes is this fill plug for the putting in the fluid, the lubricant. Let me get that next. So just a pipe plug, looks to be 3/8 MPT. That's it, fully disassembled. So on this case, you know, I'm not sure if I'm going to use it or not. I have a different one that I'm planning to use, the internals, and we'll use that one for reassembly. But I wanted to check this one out, so there it is, all apart. And in the next video, we'll get to putting one of these back together, or possibly taking the main case apart, and we'll see what we get into. Thanks for watching.